That last construct that I showed you for conditional command execution, as I mentioned, was rather rudimentary. There is a much more powerful one available in the shell programming language. It's known as the if statement. You'll probably be familiar with this if you've ever programmed in any other language. Just about every programming language in the world supports the notion of an if statement. So as I said, it's much more powerful. It's also more readable. Well, it is for me anyway. This is what it looks like. We start by using the word if, then we put a command there. Now what happens at that point is that the command gets run. Immediately that the command completes, the shell looks at the exit status of that command and determines whether we should proceed into the next block of code or whether we should skip that block of code entirely. And if the exit status is a 0, meaning true if you like, then we proceed into the block of code, otherwise we don't. And if we do proceed into the block of code, then the very next word that the shell expects to see on the next line would be the word then. If you don't put the word then in, your shell will give you an error message. Then next it will execute those series of commands, and there must be at least one command, until finally we reach the phi. Phi, of course, being if spelled backwards. In other programming languages you might see this as endif or something like that. And the phi is put there so that the shell knows what point to jump down to if command 1 turned out to be false, or in other words, command 1 produced some kind of error. We would need, of course, to know where to skip down to. We would skip over commands 2 and 3 and so on down to the phi and then continue execution on from that point. So let's look at an example of that. We'll use diff as our example here. We'll run diff, we'll compare file 1 and file 2. Now the reason I'm redirecting the output there to /dev/null is I actually don't want to see the output of the diff command. I just want to know whether the two files are different or not. There's probably a command line option that I can specify to diff to say don't actually display the differences, just use the exit status to determine whether they're different or not, but I couldn't be bothered looking that up in the diff manual page. So I'll instead just redirect the output to /dev/null. Now if you recall, I mentioned before that if diff discovers that the both files are the same, then it will return an exit status of 0, which we can think of as meaning true, and so we will then of course proceed into the block of code. In other words, if the files are the same, then we go into the block of code. So if the files are the same, then we echo out the words the files are the same, then we remove one of them. I guess we don't need two of them if they're the same, and then we exit out of the program. So that's I guess a neat little example of the way you can use an if statement. Let's see something like that in operation. I'll just compare two files in this directory, names.dat and names.txt, and I will redirect the output to /dev/null because I actually don't want to see the output, and then I press enter and I get that little prompt that means you haven't finished your command yet, which is correct. I have not finished my if statement. Then I need the word then, and then I can say echo the files are the same, and then I can obviously remove names.txt, and that'll be enough. I don't need to exit. And phi. So now after I've typed in the word phi, the statement is indeed complete at that point, so it will run the statement at that point. So let's have a look and see what it actually does. It does nothing. That echo command did not happen, so I guess the rm command didn't happen either, which means of course that the files were not the same. Names.dat and names.txt were different. So I guess that's a fair proof that we now have the ability to control whether certain code gets executed or not. Okay, in the next module we will have a look at some extensions to the if statement that make it more powerful than you can see on the screen at the moment.